All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is John Domas, and I'm the Director of the Michigan Chemistry Council. And welcome to today's program, Progress Toward Achieving Sustainable Firefighting Foams for Challenging Chemistries. A number of our recent programs have featured industry insights on their own sustainability journeys, and I'm very excited for this update on a topic, fluorine-free firefighting foams, that is of significant interest to many. We greatly appreciate Wacker's interest in sharing their perspective on achieving sustainable firefighting foams for challenging chemistries, particularly those found in the silicones industry. And so we hope you find this content valuable. Got a lot of great content to look forward to. As a basic housekeeping matter, all of our attendees' lines are muted. Don't have to worry about that, but we do hope to address some questions and have some concluding remarks in the time at the end. So we encourage you to submit your questions using the chat or Q&A features. We've also received some questions ahead of time, so we do have a number we'd like to get to, but if we don't get to them during today's program, we will have our presenters follow up afterwards and make sure that you're able to connect with them to get some of that information. We are not ignoring you, and we appreciate, again, all the interest in the topic. As another matter, today's session is being recorded, and we will make the slides available for everyone afterwards to review and the recording. So you will have all that information at the ready. Please also reply via email if you are interested in receiving CEU credits for Michigan PE or other educational requirements, and we'd be glad to assist you with that. So this time I want to introduce our two presenters for today. Mike Cannert is Wacker Chemical Company's Corporate Manager of Environment. He's been with the chemical company for 7 years. He spent the previous 26 years with OEM and Tier 1 automotive suppliers. Mike's expertise covers a broad range of environmental topics, including responsible care management systems, audit and compliance programs, and remediation project strategy to leading Wacker's North and Central America's region environmental, sustainability, and regulatory programs. Mike has an undergraduate degree in professional chemistry from Eastern Michigan University and a master's degree in engineering management from Wayne State University. And his other presenter today is Mike Strong. He is Wacker Chemical Company's Senior Regulatory Affairs Specialist. He has been at Wacker since 1989 in the Regulatory Affairs and Product Safety Department. Mike has served on the Silicones Environmental Health and Safety Center, which is the SEHSC, Operating Safety Committee since 1990, including participation in its earlier fire testing programs and in the preparation of safety and emergency response guides. Mike is a National Fire Protection Agency certified fire protection specialist. We have some NFPA folks on here. Mike has a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and a Master's degree of Science in interdisciplinary technology in polymers and resins and occupational safety and health. So incredibly well qualified. We appreciate the time and work that they put into preparing this valuable update, and we're going to turn it over to Mike.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, John. I really appreciate the introduction. And I also want to thank John and Lisa in the MCC for helping put this together with us. I'd also like to thank, a lot of the internal folks at Wacker that helped with this. A lot of information was provided by them, and especially Mike Strong, who's helping me with the presentation today. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get going here. We're going to talk about progress in achieving sustainable firefighting foams for challenging chemistries. So just a quick heads up on how we're going to do this today. We're going to provide some background information. Some of this is probably pretty common knowledge for this audience, but again, we just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to talk about some of the basic ideas with fighting fires and what fire foam is about. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some specific programs that we've implemented in Europe with Wacker. And then we're going to conclude with some work that we're continuing to do with the SEHSC on trying to find some of the best replacement foam for our sites and our locations. So Wacker, if you haven't heard of us before, we're a company that was founded in 1914. We're headquartered out of Munich, Germany. And in the NCA region, we've got 6 manufacturing locations, which 4 are technical centers and sales offices. We're located in the states of Michigan, Tennessee, Kentucky, Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and California. We've got about 1,655 employees employed in the region. So we've got 4 product divisions: silicones, polymers, which is vinyl acetate polymers, polysilicon, which is the base material for integrated circuits and solar cells. And then we have a Wacker Biosolutions team, which has a number of fine chemical products and also getting into the biotech industries. As you can see here, we have a number of market sectors which we contribute to, and it's really a broad set of customers that Wacker would supply. So as the silicones division, we are part of the American Chemistry Council. And one of the groups that we have participated in, the ACC sector group, Silicones Environmental Health and Safety Center, as you can see here, has a number of the other silicone manufacturers participating. The whole purpose of this group is to look at product stewardship, how our industry interacts with the environment, and to ensure that there's safe handling of our materials. An example of this here is a number of publications that the SEHSC will help put out. And these are very focused on specific either precursor materials or in some cases, they're products that we supply to industry. And these are all designed to really provide the best and most comprehensive information on safe handling for these materials. So silicone is a class of synthetic substances. It includes polymers, and it's based on a framework of alternating silicon and oxygen atoms. And usually there's some kind of an organic group attached, and that actually sort of is the way that you sort of create these molecules that you can tailor to do various activities and get the performance that you're looking for. A number of the raw materials that we work with are have very unique properties. And this is really of concern if you're looking at this from a fire perspective. So as an example, chlorosilanes, they're fairly volatile, but if they react with water, you get hydrochloric acid gas. So again, a unique property just for that material. If you're using some of the silicon hydrides, these substances can release hydrogen. They've got a lot of hydrogen ingrained in the molecules. They'll release this hydrogen over time naturally, but if you react it with the wrong materials, it can release that hydrogen rather quickly. So again, these properties have to be understood, and you have to know the right firefighting methods in order to maximize, the effectiveness. Now, everyone here is, I'm sure, heard of the fire triangle. And again, this is just a way to show that when you have a fire, you really have to have a number of elements together in the right proportions in order to create that chemical reaction that we call fire. So essentially, firefighting is removing one of those elements or two of the elements. And at that point, then you can reduce that chemical reaction and extinguish the fire. So again, firefighting is removing oxygen, removing some of the heat, potentially keeping the fuel from interacting with the chemical reaction. So this is some other information that I'm sure is pretty well known, but again, not all fuels are equal. So if you're looking at a fire, you need to make sure that the extinguishing agents that you're going to use are compatible with that type of a fire. And today we're mostly going to talk about flammable liquids, These include things like gasoline, greases, acetones, anything that's can boil and bubble would be considered Class B. And the unique characteristics of a Class B fire is that these liquids can spread. So if you do try to put an extinguishing agent on it, it could actually spread the fire more because they're liquid. Water and common extinguishing agents may be heavier than that flammable liquid that you're trying to extinguish. And again, that's going to sink to the bottom and it isn't going to be as effective. The vapors that come off of these can be flammable. And again, you need to consider how can you reduce the generation of vapors. And then some flammable liquids may be chemically they might actually react with the water or your extinguishing agents. So you got to understand if that's going to be an issue when you're selecting your fire extinguishing agents. So there's many types of fire suppression agents. Water is the most common. There's dry agents. This is the most common that you're going to find in your house, potentially in the office. Gaseous extinguishing agents include carbon dioxide, potentially halons. You'll see that in data centers where you want to maintain your expensive equipment. If you do have a fire you need to put out, you don't want to destroy all the equipment. Firefighting foams have been used, and these are very effective for fighting Class B fires or flammable liquid fires. They actually have been around since the turn of the century, and these type of foams really are good at preventing the contact of oxygen with the liquid. They also perform another function of separating the fire from the actual fuel. So it creates a layer on the top of the flammable liquid. There's sort of two classes that we kind of pulled out here in our graphic just to show you that some of these foams contain fluorinated compounds. And these are the PFAS compounds that you may have heard about. We'll talk a little bit more about that in some more of the slides here. And then there's some fluorine foams that are being developed that do not contain the fluorine compounds. So these two types here, one of them a protein foam. These are very old types of firefighting foams. And you can see from the graphic here, the little bubbles that are created and form this foam, and it excludes the oxygen, and then it also prevents the escape of the vapors. So it works with a couple of different actions here. These protein foams are great, they're biodegradable, but the downside is that they don't hold together very well under certain conditions. And so some materials just break them right down and they're not effective. So there was a development back in the 1960s and 70s to come to these synthetic foams. And the synthetic foams include aqueous foam-forming foams and also alcohol-resistant aqueous form-filling foams. The aqueous, the AFFF, are basically water-based. They contain hydrocarbon surfactants, and they're very good at flammable fires for fuels, jet fuel, gasoline, those type of liquids. The alcohol-resistant foams were created because some of the alcohols, such as methanol, will break down the standard AFFF foams. And then, of course, there's the newest type, which is this fluorine-free foams, or we'll call them F3s, as we go through the presentation here. So, polling question number 1. And let's see if we can get that pulled up here. And what we'd like you to do is just answer it, and we'll see what we get. Everybody see the question?
Polling questions are anonymous, just FYI, in case that was relevant.
Oh, thank you, John. I was supposed to ask that and I forgot.
Yes. Thanks everybody for participating. We'll give it about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, 82% said yes and 18% said no.
Okay, so the majority of our audience here today actually has a stake in the game here. So we're going to get some more information out of it as we go through the presentation today. So I appreciate your participation, and we'll move on to the next topic here. So AFFF foam, highly effective. It's been around since the 60s and 70s, developed by the military, the Navy, for fighting fires on aboard ships and aircraft carriers. It's generally mixed in a concentration between 3 and 6% with water. And it's the way that it allows this foam to spread across that hydrocarbon liquid that makes it so effective. So there's some really unique properties about AFFF foam that really make it work well. The film creates a vapor barrier, as we mentioned, and then there's also, it contains a negative charge. Fluorine is a negative charge molecule, and again, that really repels the fuels, which tend to be positive charged with all those hydrocarbons on them. And that has another action that really makes this effective. And then again, use of alcohol resistant foams in that case would make sense if you happen to have alcohols or polar solvents that are flammable. And then the F3 foams that they're developing now, they work on a completely different mechanism. And again, because of that, they're going to have differences in how they're going to be applied, differences in how you use them, differences in how you store them and mix them.
Yeah.
So a little bit here about, okay, we've been talking about fluorine and fluorine compounds, but we haven't really said what they were. And this is just a slide to get into that. So everybody's probably heard, this is in the news every week, PFAS and PFOA. These have been identified as bad actors. They're trying to get them out of the environment, out of the products that are out there. And you can see a graphic of what those look like there. They're carbon atoms with a bunch of fluorines around them, and they've got some other organic components to them. And notice the OH group on there, the water. H2O is water, so the OH group reacts with the water, and that allows it to dissolve somewhat in the water. These have been identified as persistent organic pollutants, and that's the big problem, right? We like the idea that this foam will become very stable. It will hold together when you spray it on the fire. It's going to be resistant to the heat and the chemicals and things like that. We really like that idea. It makes it a great foam. The bad thing is once it leaks off, gets into the ditch, runs into the water, they never break down. And that's why they're known as forever chemicals. And that's the other reason why the drinking water standards and many of these requirements now in terms of the concentrations are so low, is because if you drink water that contains these PFAS compounds over your whole lifetime, they never go away. Your body can build them up, and that becomes a problem. So that's why the standards have been written very low in the parts per billion range. So again, when we made these synthetic foams, they used a lot of these PFAS and PFOA compounds because they were so stable. And it was great, worked well. And between the 70s and 2016, that was the predominant materials they were using. Then these were called a C8. This is the length of the chain of carbons in those molecules. And when they started identifying that, hey, this could be a problem, these things stay in the environment too long, well, what can we do? Well, let's make smaller chains. So they went to a C6 chain in hopes that those are going to break down faster in the environment. Now, it's not really clear that that's going to happen. So now people are saying, let's move to the F3 or the fluorine-free AFFF types of foams. And these are the new ones that are being developed. And what we're hoping is that some of these risks and uncertainties were, related to these PFAS containing foams can be eliminated by going to the fluorine-free foams. So you've got some, we saw that some 80% of the audience here said that they have AFFF foam. Well, how do you know if you've got these fluorinated compounds in your foam? That's a pretty hard question. It's not easy to find. And you can get a hold of the safety data sheet, but there's a couple problems with that. One, safety data sheet only tells you if it's in a concentration of more than 1%. If you've got it at 0.5% or 0.1%, it might not even be in your safety data sheet. That's a problem because as I said in the previous slide, we're looking at parts per billion levels in some cases. So you could easily be below 1% and still have parts per billion levels in your materials. Another problem is there's all these kind of, like, they'll say things like generic, fluoroalkyl surfactant or fluoroalkyl substance or something, and then they'll put confidential under the CAS number. And so you really don't know what that is. You have to call your supplier. You can potentially look on their website and see if they've got any disclosures about, not containing PFAS or PFOA or PFAS program, components. But again, not an easy thing to even identify if you've got these materials in your foam. You have to really follow up with the vendor and the manufacturer to find that information out. So, polling question 2. I'll let you read it and we'll let you answer and we'll see what we got.
Everybody, please take a minute to answer the poll question number 2, if you would. We'll close that out in about 15 more seconds. I'll also note, see a couple of attendees with their hands raised. We encourage you to put any questions you have into the chat or Q&A feature. I think we've addressed the chat and it's now able for folks to use. So 5 more seconds on this poll. Thanks again, everybody.
All right. A was 32%, B was 24%, C was 3%, D was 8%, and 32% are still not sure.
Yep, that's great. I kind of expected to see that we would have some folks that still don't know what they have. Certainly, if you're in the, you've got some of those C8, PFOA and PFAS materials, those are going to be the highest risk. Of course, the C6s are supposed to be better, but we're not sure that we agree, that we know that's the case. It could be. And then other PFAS compounds always can end up breaking down into something. These are very complex chemistries, and it's really hard to tell what the real risks are. Certainly the F3 type foam is really where we want to go for sure. And thank you for your participation there too. That was quite interesting. So everybody's heard, that there's a number of potential phase outs with these AFFF foams. If you can notice on here, these are all governmental sort of mandates or initiatives, Department of Defense, the FAA. So this is going to affect the airports. I think the municipalities may, a lot of those, and municipal firefighting organizations, they may have some through various states. But again, in here, what you don't see is any industry mandates that I'm aware of. Now, some states certainly may be moving in that direction, but certainly here, I don't think in Michigan we've seen anything that says, hey, as an industry, we have to get out of this. So you can see some of these dates are coming pretty close, right? In the next year or two. So since we, in industry, and we'll talk about this in the future slides, you know, our main driver is going to be just risk, right? So one of the questions that we always had, well, what can we do to reduce our risk? We saw that there was a fair number of our audience here today have PFAS foams that you have on site. So one of the first strategies is how can we mitigate our current risks, right, while we're trying to find something new. And the state of Michigan, they've come out and they've put out some recommendations and, you know, how to mitigate some of these risks. These are basic things that really boil down just to one simple concept. AFFF foam is extremely effective, but only use it in cases where it's really going to be life critical or asset critical. Don't use it for training. Don't use it in situations where you've got fires that could be fought with maybe less potential concerns. One thing to also be concerned about is insurance. If you happen to have an incident and you've been doing, you've been using the AFFF foam in a way that hasn't been under its approved use, your insurance company could, you know, deny your claim. We've also found that our insurance companies now are starting to put specific language in our policies to say, hey, we're not going to pay for AFFF foam cleanup if it's related to PFAS or PFOA or one of these compounds. They've already gotten a number of claims to have to clean these up, and they're pretty expensive. So they're trying to stay out of that, and they're putting that in our policies.
Yeah, the environmental cleanups have very low limits on, you know, the residual materials, so they're very expensive, as Michael said.
So we got the third polling question here, and this one's pretty simple. Have you thought about what you're going to do if you had a release of your AFFF foam and it contains PFAS?
Thanks, everybody. Please take a look at this poll question and respond if you will. And I'll take the moderator's prerogative from the Chemistry Council of noting that Michigan does have MIOSHA rules for Part 73, which is industrial fire brigades, that are in the works. They're being developed and will be coming out soon. That will basically codify the prohibition on the use of fluorinated foams for training purposes and some other very basic guidelines under MIOSHA. If you have any questions on that, I'd be glad to provide that with you. But we're going to close out this poll in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Yes was 55%. No was 29%. And 16% do not have or use PFAS containing foam.
That's good. That's good to see. Most, the majority of people have thought about it. Because again, when you're talking about parts per billion, doing some of those pre-calculations, like the hypotheticals, like if I lost all my fire foam, what would be the levels and how much volume of materials and where am I going to put it? And you know, that's all really good activity to do way before you have anything happen. So another great program that I think Michigan's been very proactive on, and I think this one here looks to be very effective, and I'm pretty sure that the numbers in here are probably somewhat outdated. I pulled this, you know, at some point in the past, but I did want to just put it there that, you know, Michigan has collected up a lot of its AFFF foams from the municipal fire departments and in the public fire departments. And you can see they had a fund here. It's expensive to get rid of these things. And I think it really probably helped a lot to get this stuff out of the system. And it was properly disposed too. You know, I mean, that takes a little bit of effort to, you know, where can we send it and who are the right companies to contract to take care of it. Notice none of this had anything to do with industry. Industry, we're on our own. We have to find our own disposal and management methods here. So it's good that it's happened in the public sector, but as industry, we have to take this on ourselves. Replacing the existing AFFF foam. I think the first comment here is it's not a simple swap out in most cases. Maybe your chemicals that you're using, maybe it is, but for a lot of industrial chemicals, takes a lot of thought. The last thing we want to do is to swap out to some new F3 foam, and in the middle of some emergency or something where we have life critical situations, we got our assets on the line, we don't want to be finding out then that this is the new foam we went to is not going to be effective for our chemical. Yeah. So that's the highest importance, or one of the highest importance here. The unique properties of the industrial chemicals are very different, which means that a standard F3 foam that takes care of jet fuels may not even be close to appropriate for our industrial chemicals. Most foam manufacturers are making these, but they're not doing a lot of testing specific to other industries, you know, that we've seen at this point. Replacement foams may require different storage, mixing, and application equipment. So I can get my drums of the new foam, shows up on my site, and oh geez, we can't use it until we put the right equipment in, the right inductors, the right mixers for these materials. And then the last one is if you do the replacement, make sure that you decontaminate all existing equipment and piping. When you're talking about parts per billion levels, a small amount of residual left in that system could still throw you into potential problem when that all gets mixed and put out on your property. So another poll, they're coming quick here. So if you have AFFF at your site, has your organization replaced PFAS containing foams?
Hey, everybody, if you could answer the poll question in the next 10 seconds, then we'll continue on.
All right. 19% already have F3 foams in place. 61% are conducting testing or having plans for replacing. And 20%, we do not have any plans for replacing.
Okay, very interesting. And so there's still a good significant number of organizations out that are still looking and trying to get the plans in place. And we'll talk about where Wacker is with that here shortly. So Wacker, you know, as I mentioned in the beginning slides, we're a German company, and we've got some of our largest sites over there. You know, our one main site in Burghausen has got over 10,000 people. It's a multi-functional site in the sense that it has all four of our divisions and product lines are there. So all the technologies that Wacker has us all in one site. And so they are having the same issues in Europe. These PFAS compounds being listed under the persistent pollutants. So they're trying to find some way out. So they got 9 companies together, and in 20 and 21, they started doing some tests on the different fuels. And in this case here, I'm going to use the word challenge agent for fuels, but basically these are the chemicals that we're using that we think might catch on fire, that we want to put some fire suppressant on and put the fire out. Chlorosilines is one of the common chemicals that Wacker uses, and this is one of the challenge agents that was selected for testing. They utilized various consultants, and they really looked at the foams that were available to them in Europe. So again, it was a slightly different question than we have with our sites here in the US. And you can see some of the companies that were involved in this. The Last Fire and the WFB is both consulting companies that they had helped work on this with them. So this consortium got together. They identified 35 fuels or challenge agents that they wanted to list as priority one. Some of these were shared by 2 or more parties, and other ones were more unique to the individual companies. And you can see that chlorothalane was one of the challenge agents or fuels, chemicals that were selected. You could see that a lot of fuels or chemicals were not selected, 36. And so this doesn't answer all the questions, but it probably answers, at least enough so that people can start to make some decisions. They had a number of phases on this. The first one was, does the foam break down with the chemicals that we're using? The other one is, what is going to happen in terms of how is it somewhat going to be effective when you put this foam on top of the challenge agent at suppressing vapors? They did a number of tests, and they're also got into some phase 2 where they're looking at maybe some additional testing later on, but they selected 3 foams. And these are all European products, by the way. So the Wacker team looked at, in Germany, took a look at various scenarios. How are these foams going to be used at Wacker? Effectiveness with the chlorothalanes. What are other materials that might come in contact with? Does it have any kind of alcohol resistance, viscosity, stability, burn back? These are just a few of the criteria that our team looked at based on the testing. They really selected out of those 3 foams, one that they thought they felt very comfortable with, and this Vapurex AR by a company called Shatimer or DR Shatimer. And they basically have proceeded to replace all the fluorinated fighting foams at the Wacker Berghausen site in Germany. And then they're progressing to move that to the other sites in Europe. Now we would have liked to have said, oh, hey, this is a great solution for us, but we started looking at it, and it's not a perfect drop-in solution. First off, it has to be imported. It's not really in the supply chains here in the US. The availability of substitute, a lot of our suppliers are more than just supplying foam. They're actually helping us implement it, coming out, doing monthly checks. So again, having a material that's available and being used by our suppliers is certainly a consideration. And then the other point is that there were many silicone materials that were not tested. And so we thought that additional testing is really required for us to move ahead and start replacing our AFFF foams at our sites.
Yeah, and you should also keep in mind that the standards in Europe, like for instance, the CE and that are not exactly the same as having a UL or a NFPA certification.
Yep. And Mike, I'm going to let you take over from here.
Yep. And so as a result, the silicones industry in the US, which had done relatively extensive testing on AFFF foams back in the early 2000s, we decided that we needed to take a look now and maybe initiate a new project to look at the silicone chemicals and the available F3 replacement foams. So we started putting this together in 2019. However, like most projects, it takes a while to get things rolling. We hired a consulting firm, JAG Safety Consulting, to assist us, and we contracted for testing both at DECRA, which is a process safety type organization that operates several locations, but they have a fire testing area in Illinois, and the Southwest Research Institute, which is in San Antonio, Texas. And they are where we are going to be doing our testing starting this year for the remainder of the small scale tests and the large scale tests. Some of the things that we had to look at was, of course, these challenge agents are relatively expensive, and some of the tests, especially the large pan fire tests, will require, some cases, a drum or two maybe of material. And of course, we've got a large number of foams that we're trying to screen. Basically, our small scale testing is going to determine which foams progress to the large scale testing, but we've identified 20 different F3 foams that we want to look at. And of course, we've got to pay the laboratory and consultant fees, things like that. Our approach is to identify potential foams, as I said, based on the literature review and the looking at each one of the suppliers' sites, their STSs and things like that. We selected 20 foams for testing. We also tried to identify challenge agents that we would use, and there are 7 of those that reflect a different variety of silicone chemistries. And then the plan is, as I said, to complete the small scale testing first of all of the foams versus a selection of the challenge agents. We're only going to do 3 challenge agents for the small scale tests. We've got an alkoxysilane, which releases alcohol. We've got a hydrogen functional siloxane, which releases hydrogen gas. And we have industry's favorite, which is trichlorosilane, which has a wide variety of uses in both making polymers and in the electronics industry. So once we have the small scale pan test done to see what materials are compatible, we will be moving to large scale burn tests to see which of the foams that passed small scale testing can pass a large scale extinguishment test. Next slide. Once we have reviewed all of the foams and determined the best actors, then we are going to have to look at updating various emergency response guidelines and other literature to reflect the new reality of PFAS-free foams. These are the challenge agents that we picked. Hexamethyl disiloxane is probably the closest analog to a pure hydrocarbon type of liquid. Hexamethyl disilazane gives off ammonia, so it has a basic sort of character that might interfere with some of the foam chemistries. Tetramethyl disiloxane has hydrogen groups, and of course, anything that forms hydrogen can be extremely easy to reignite. The trimethoxymethylsilane gives off methanol when it is burned or reacts with water, and so that gives you something requiring alcohol resistance. Trichlorosilane is acidic and gives off hydrochloric acid. Dichloromethylsilane is another one that gives off hydrochloric acid, and also these have hydrogen groups that can be released as well. And then dimethoxy dimethylsilane is once again a commonly used material that releases methanol. I listed the flash points and boiling points for those that are interested. The foam stability, this is not rocket science. It's basically you put a layer of challenge agent and you put a layer of foam over it, and you see whether or not the foam deteriorates in contact with the challenge agent over a period of 30 minutes. During that time, you also pass a flame over the material to see whether or not there are sufficient vapors coming through to cause the material to ignite. We began this testing in 2021, and we've started with 10 foams, but we've still got 10 more that we need to do. One of the things that I think you can see just looking at these pans, if you look at the one in the back left side, you can see that the foam is completely gone. So it has, you know, that would definitely be a fail. Next. There's the 3 challenge agents that I mentioned that we're using for the small scale test, and that's both to save cost and time. The idea is that, okay, we get the small scale testing done, then we move to the large scale testing with fewer foams and maybe more challenge agents. You can see the person is holding a flame over one of the pans there, and they do that during the entire test time to see if any catch fire. Next. And as you can see in the lower left-hand picture, one of the pans did indeed catch fire. So that's sort of a fail right there. The large scale tests are going to be done this year, we hope, you know, based on, you know, availability and material supplies and things like that. The slides on the right are just showing a pan fire using siloxane, and one of the things that I wanted to point out is that all of the smoke that comes off when you burn a siloxane or a silane or a silazane, besides containing maybe things like hydrochloric acid and stuff like that, also contains a lot of silica, so it becomes opaque very quickly. And you can find yourself, if this is an interior fire, very quickly losing all visibility to navigate within a building or anything else. Next. So these are examples of existing guidance documents that you can look at if you want to. Although, of course, the ASTM manual is one that you would have to purchase, but the DOT and the SEHSC manuals are available online and, of course, cost nothing to look at. But we're going to have to update all of this information so that fire responders and that are aware of, at least in a general way, what works and what doesn't. Next. And we're up to another polling question.
Yep, this should be the last one, I think.
Yep, and basically, the question here is important because each industry uses different sets of chemicals. And just because maybe our testing shows that something really works great with trichlorosilane, that doesn't mean that it's going to work great with, say, vinyl chloride or something else involved in a fire, like they had down in Ohio recently with their train derailment.
Okay, if you will, please take another couple seconds and answer the last question if you haven't already.
Hey, that looks really good. I see we've got quite a few people have done some testing already. Some said they didn't require it, and then some folks are planning it. So it looks like the majority of people are on board with this whole testing. So I think this is really interesting. Thanks again.
Yeah. And then next. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done by industry, by the firefighting, fire foam companies. In many cases, we've got, like, say, a large number of foams, but we don't have knowledge as to whether or not the available ones work with anything other than the common hydrocarbons. And once you've identified an alternative foam, you really do need to check to make sure that it's compatible not only with the chemicals that you're using, but also with the equipment that you've got installed, because you might have to re-engineer your equipment that you're using to, say if it's an interior foam system, then a fixed foam, or even if you're a portable foam use, there's things that you need to consider there, and you need to share information. That's one thing that I would say, is that especially if you're a member of an industry group, if you find something that is either a problem or a solution, it's good to be able to share the safety aspects of the information with other members of your trade associations and groups.
So with that, I think we've come to the end of our presentation, and I think, John, I think we do have a few minutes that we can answer maybe some questions.
Yes, absolutely. Got a lot of questions, some in the chat, some in the Q&A, and some that were submitted ahead of time. I think one of the first questions that came in was, is the presentation also applicable to the types of foam that are added to wet fire sprinkler systems?
The same sort of testing would be necessary to determine whether or not the foams work.
The answer is, if you can find a compatible foam for your chemicals with the right engineering, and you should be able to use that foam for your chemicals in a fixed system.
All right, thanks. I think there is a couple of the questions about how to dispose of the supply of the PFAS foam, or how to clean the equipment. And I think you may have provided some links there. There's a video at the end there, but any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see the link here that is the very last one here, cleaning fire foam tanks of PFAS. So this actually comes out of Germany. It's a YouTube video, and the same person who did this video has another dozen or half a dozen videos on various fire foam system related questions. But this one here, he talks about how you go about cleaning the PFAS out of the system. As far as the disposal, I think that's probably potentially a moving target. The most common method that is being utilized today, if you've got low parts per billion kind of levels, or you've got relatively low levels, is the use of carbon absorbing the PFAS on the carbon, running the water through a carbon system, filtering it out, and then that carbon is going to be handled as a hazardous waste, probably for incineration.
Yeah,
but
and
again,
that's
a general concept. I mean, I think each individual case has to be looked at with your waste vendor.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is to check with your own waste handling vendor, whether it's Clean Harbors or someone else that you're using, because each one may have have their own set of guidelines that they're following.
Okay, a couple of the questions that have come in. Any industry discussions around the potential for the UV hydrogen gas method of breaking down the PFAS compounds? That may be a specific destruction question related to what you were just mentioning.
Yeah, I think that the main thing that we would say on anything is that the US EPA has the final word of how to destroy things, dispose of things. And we're not looking at how to get rid of the PFAS foams. We're looking at how to replace them, but not how to get rid of them necessarily.
Right.
A separate but very important question, right?
Yep. And one just one note to that too is that landfills now and disposal facilities have now gotten wind that this risk is out there, so they're really trying to protect their interests by not getting materials that are contaminated with PFAS, because the actual risk is really not that well known, in terms of what's long term, what is that going to do if you have these materials come on your site. So there's so many uncertainties. I think that's going to have to just be worked through on an individual basis at that point in time.
Someone's mentioning here in the chat about cleaning PFAS using hot water. He was stating that was been proven not to work to remove PFAS. So definitely investigate everything that is out there.
Yep.
Couple questions around the not only the fire safety performance of the replacements, but also the environmental aspects of it, and trying to prevent regrettable substitution.
Yep. And that was one of the things that I did mention when Wacker came up with their final replacement in Europe. They had a multifunctional team in the sense that the fire department had the first cut at it, and they said, yeah, we like these materials, but then before they approved it, it had to go to the environmental group, and they had to look at it. It had to go to the health and safety team. They had to look at it because we actually have full-time fire departments. That's their full-time job. These people are going to get exposed to this potentially. And so all of those concerns had to be part of that final selection process.
Yeah, I would also say that everyone who is getting a replacement foam should be looking at the SDS for the material and checking out whether or not there is what you would consider adequate toxicity data on it. If you turn to section 11 of the SDS and you see not determined, not determined, not determined, then that might be a good indication that foam has not had complete testing for its health effects, either in animals or human beings.
Okay, there's a couple of folks that are interested in some of the results of the testing, and if any of those further results or something more detailed is available, I will direct our presenters to possibly follow up with you on that. A couple of folks were asking where the testing was done, and likewise, maybe they can follow up with you directly, unless there's something you're interested to share right now.
Well, we did mention where the STHSC's testing is being done, and the European testing, of course, was done by the last fire in WFV groups. But basically right now, we don't have, for the US anyway, any final determinations on these foams. As I said, we didn't even get through the first, the full list of 20 foams that we are currently screening. And then after the screening, we still have to do the large scale pan fire tests to see how things turn out. You know, this is kind of like an ongoing process.
Absolutely. Well, Mike and Mike, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to close us out with, either any of the questions you're seeing here or just any final thoughts for our attendees. And as mentioned, we'll of course follow up with some of those resources afterwards, but
I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity. I think this is an important topic. Of course, we always wish that, you know, we could find the answers to these more quickly and easier, but not everything worth doing is easy or fast. So we're going to keep continuing working with the SEHSC and our partners to find you know, the best solutions for the replacement of these foams.
Yeah. And for those of you who work with unusual chemistries, maybe you've got organometallic compounds, maybe you've got other types of monomers that you're using or things like that, keep in mind that anything that can react with itself can probably also react with the materials that are being used to try and extinguish it. And you just want to make sure that those reactions aren't going to prevent you from extinguishing it.
all right. Well, thank you so much. This has been an incredible update, a lot of interest, and we appreciate, again, the time and your resources that have gone into sharing this with us. And we look forward to sharing the follow-up with you, and please be in touch with our presenters if there's any specific questions. Again, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.